Hello, everybody. I hope you're having an absolutely wonderful day. And today I thought it would be fun to make a personal video, ranking all my favourite time periods in Earth's history from least favourite to most favourite. Technically, I don't as such have a favourite. I have ones I'm more interested in, but I'm not trying to say one is better than the other or one is particularly worse or bad. Um, I appreciate anybody who has any kind of interest in this in any way, shape, or form. If whatever's your favourite, then you go because this has been something I've been interested in forever. So this will be a pretty thorough ranking. And as you know, I have a tendency to go on and on and on, but I don't think people will particularly mind that because I know when I see a video about something I'm really interested in, particular this paleontology deep time, I just want it to go on forever. But yes, I won't really show any pictures in this, it'll just be me here going on about all kinds of randomness. But to let you know, I will be covering obviously the time periods. I won't be covering in eras, and I will just be classing eons as their own thing because breaking down all of those would take too much time, and in some of them hardly anything goes on. But yeah, this is something it will be a genuine enjoyable thing for me to do and that I'm really excited about. It's not just some randomness. This is an idea I've had for quite some time. So enough of that. Let's get on with it. Up at number 15 is the Archean eon. Now, I didn't want to do this, but I kind of had to do this because I remember quite some years ago, for whatever reason, I found this time particularly interesting. But to be honest with you, it's basically the time in Earth's history where almost nothing happens. I'm pretty sure this might be wrong, this might be in the Proterozoic, but pretty sure there's an entire span called the Boron Billion where basically nothing happens. It's still interesting, but that's why it's there, because there's just not a lot of substance to it, in my opinion. And up at number 14 is the Hadean Eon. Now, this is just because the difference of that period to Earth now, it was absolutely alien. It looked like basically hell. It was a really interesting landscape, and I think it's a really interesting time just because of the drastic difference. It's like the complete opposite of how Earth is now, and I think just because there wasn't really any life, I don't think that matters. I think just the way Earth was and the landscape in itself was interesting, and a lot of the events were interesting in and of themselves, like the moon and Freya and everything, and quite cool stuff. But up at number 13 is the Proterozoic. Now this is where it gets more interesting. There are some particular things I like about this. For example, the Cryogenian, and there was the Avalon explosion. This is when life really took off at the end of this. And of course you have the Ediacaran biota, and those are some very interesting and bizarre creatures, if you could even call them creatures. But that is one particular thing that is my most favourite time out of the entire Precambrian. Oh goodness, my words when I'm on camera. But up at number 11, sorry, what is the matter with me? Up at number 12 would be the Neogene, and like with a lot of these, this is simply because I don't know a lot about the period or what lived there, and as to me, this is because of my knowledge. This isn't because it wasn't interesting. It didn't have cool things, and this is just my own fault, basically, my lack of knowledge in the particular period, and so that's why it's here, because all I know is there is just basically some interest in mammals, and that's it. But you did have some cool things. I know you had the likes of Argentavis and the terror birds, and those were good, but that's why that's there. And up at number 11 is the Silurian, for the same reason, is that, to my knowledge, it doesn't have a lot of substance to it compared to other periods. Still had it was still important, but the only things I'm aware of were there, which are interesting to me, is some like giant sea scorpions and some like, you know, Orthoceras looking things, and still good, but that's why it's at number 11. I wish my favourite could be my favourite number at the same time, but you know, that's not how maths works. So up at number 10, we have the Paleogene. Now this, you might be thinking, why are some of these in the Cenozoic higher up on the list than some in the Paleozoic? Because wouldn't the Paleozoic be less familiar and therefore more interesting? I would say in a way, but also it counts what everything was like at the time. And in the Paleogene, you did have some interesting things, like you had some giant animals, you had the likes of Titanoboa, and it is quite interesting seeing like the mammals take off and everything. And so in that way, it is quite interesting to me, but just not as interesting as some other times, because to be honest, it is mammals, and they were very interesting mammals, and mammals are interesting, but we already have mammals today, so that's why it's slightly less interesting than the other things. And so up at number 9, we have the Ordovician. Once again, I quite like that because it seems like, how would I put it? It seems like quite a chill, relaxed period. You know, you've just got life developing and some cool things in the sea. And it seems quite nice and quite chill. Nice place to live. Not that I'd be able to live or survive there, but it's just like quite cool, I would say. I don't know much about the life there. I've seen some pictures and watched some videos and things, but looked fairly interesting. And up at number 8, my other favourite number is the Devonian. Now this is quite a major interesting period, because both the life and the plant life and the land in the it's the age of fishes. You know, you had Dunkleostes, giant armored monstrous looking fish, and you had like, it's technically the age of fishes. So you had some really cool and interesting sea fish and sea life, and then obviously you had the life going on to the land. You had the I forget the name, but there's a time when the land life was just basically these giant fungusy things, and looked really interesting and cool. And of course you have the famous Tiktaalik. Everybody loves Tiktaalik, and that's why it's up here. And then number 7 would be the Jurassic. Now, I know when a lot of people hear of the Jurassic, they think of it as the main time of dinosaurs, and technically that's not really true. Still had a lot of dinosaurs, but it wasn't their like peak period. But it was still interesting. But funny enough, I actually don't know a lot about it. It still had some really good dinosaurs though. But what I would say for me most of the time, the carnivorous dinosaurs are more interesting than the herbivorous dinosaurs. And the Jurassic, a lot of the Jurassic, there was a lot of herbivores, but it was still quite cool. You know, you had Allosaurus, you had Stegosaurus, you had Archaeopteryx, and you even have the Diplodocus. Now, I'm going to show you something. This might look a bit weird. Try my best. But I actually have the Diplodocus. My goodness. I actually have Diplodocus on my socks. Yes, that's right. I have dino socks. Autism go brr. No, but I always like dinosaurs, always will. But I assume that's a Diplodocus. Brachiosaurus has the little head thingy. But I'm still learning about these things all the time. But that's why it's at number 7, just because it's still very interesting. I just think there's more interesting things. And up at number 6, I think this is an interesting choice, and this is the Quaternary period, which is technically the period we're in now, and that to me just had so many interesting things. Particularly what will always be interesting to me is, well, humans. You had other humans, you had the Ice Age. You know, you had mammoths, saber-toothed tiger. Going back, you had you had giant sloths, and you had things like Parasaphirium, the biggest mammal ever. You had saber-toothed tigers, all kinds of cool stuff which you fortunately can't find today. And other humans, and just thinking about there being other types of humans on the planet, like the Neanderthals, and how they all would have interacted. And always fascinates me what the world would be like today if they survived. RIP. But just because of the complexity of, like, particularly the Ice Age and the rise of humanity, it'll always be a top one for me. And then up at number 5 we have the Permian period, and I've always liked this period. I don't particularly know why, but I've always just liked it. I love the concept of the type of animals in it, the ones that aren't really reptiles but aren't mammals at the same time. They're like kind of branching off properly, and you have these like really interesting looking animals where they look like they kind of like have the like, you know, gorgonopsids. They kind of have the stature of these big lizards, but then they have these whiskers and saber teeth, and it's just really interesting life. And you have other things like Dimetrodon, and obviously there was a major bad event that happened during that time, and I like speculating things of that as well, like what would have happened if that never occurred. Me and one of my friends, and we were going to make trying to make still a speculative evolution project of what if the Great Dying never happened, and all that stuff is extremely interesting to me. But that is number 5. We are now into the top 5. Awoogie. Apologies. At number 4 is the Triassic. Now, some people might say the Triassic isn't that interesting. I disagree. I think it's one of the most interesting periods because after a mass extinction is when some of the most weirdest and bizarre animals appear, and that's why I love it. Genuinely, that's one thing that influenced this ranking, is how interesting and bizarre and unique the animals are. And let me tell you, that had some strange things. Had some, weird looking crocodile and alligator things, bunch of strange reptiles like Longosquama, and I think it would be a really interesting place to explore. And it is also the area that the time period that the rocks and fossils in my area, Merseyside, date back to. This entire area dates back to the Triassic, the rocks, and you can even see, I saw like a month ago or so on Hilbury Island, you can see exposed Triassic sandstone, and it's really cool. I don't think we have many fossil discoveries, unfortunately. I know we have the Liso man, that Ice Age mummy, but as far as I'm aware, we don't have a lot of fossils. We have Chiriferium, that's another cool one, but that's why that is interesting to me. But top three, up at number 3, we have the Cambrian. Need we say why we have such unique and amazing animals, the likes of which the Earth has never seen and probably will never see again? Hallucigenia, Anomalocaris, and I remember learning about this one specifically got me so excited and interested, because I couldn't believe some of these things actually lived on Earth. Like, some of them look like pure aliens, or like some weird experiments, or they look like kid drawings come to life. And it's just amazing to me that some of those things actually existed and have had a life, like animals today had a life. And it's just I'll be here forever going through so many of the interesting things, but it just has to be a top period because of the complexity and just the strangeness. And up at number 2, now these top 2 were they were a major challenge, but I did what I had to do. Up at number 2 is the Carbonivorous, always being one of my favourites, and at some points my top favourite, because I don't know why, just imagining me exploring that place. Like, imagine it entire, I know it wasn't the entire planet, but the entire planet, a jungle full of these weird, bizarre insects, and it's like taking the Amazon and putting it in a whole planet. And I'm so interested in like insects and invertebrates, and particularly, anybody who knows me, I have squishy Mexican red meat tarantula, and this was the prime of bugs and insects. You had giant spiders, likes of Megarachne, which unfortunately has been proven not to be a sea scorpion, but similar things probably still existed. And had Meganeura, and you had little reptiles scurrying about, but you think of reptiles being so much bigger than the insects, but back then it was the insects that were the biggest and dominated. And it's just so interesting to me, like, once again, how the Earth could have been so different and so alien. And you see the life forms in the shadows today were the ones that were dominant back then. And that's the same with the period I'm about to speak to, which you can guess what that will be. But as you can see, if I show this correctly, back there I have got a poster kind of thing with some of the Carbonivorous fauna. Will always be a top period for me, no matter what. it's just so fascinating. If there's ever a time machine and you can visit like a few places, say you can only visit 5 places, probably it will be 2 trips to the Carboniferous, 2 trips to the Cretaceous, and oh, sorry, don't know what happened there, and 1 trip to an alien planet or the future or something. But no, carrying on, up at number 1, we have the Cretaceous period, possibly the best period in all of Earth's history. That was the peak of the dinosaurs. You had everything you could possibly imagine. The famous ones like Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and of course my absolute favourite, which I will need to show you. Sorry, give me 1 second. My absolute favourite dinosaur of all time, Spinosaurus. I'm so happy there's been another Spinosaurus discovered, Spinosaurus mirabilis. This is because of Jurassic Park 3, I think, by the way, but you can even see up there, those are from year 7, the Diplodocus drawings, and obviously they're massive dinosaur fan in every way, shape and form, and also because my favourite dinosaur of all time is the Spinosaurus. It's the king, sorry, doesn't matter what anybody says to me. Sorry, Spinosaurus will hold a special place in my heart, and even though it's been discovered he was a bit smaller and a bit more aquatic than I originally envisioned from Jurassic Park 3, doesn't matter, still always be my favourite dinosaur. And I even have one of his teeth, and this is literally one of my top treasures, and because of that it has to be my favourite period. It's just, you can't get better than that. Everything you ever wanted cannot get better than that. But yeah, let's just say it might be the last thing I ever do, but if a time machine comes out, that's the first place I'm going, and I'm gonna use my binos and I am gonna look for a Spinosaurus and many other things. But yeah, that is my ranking. I hope you enjoyed it, and it's been extremely nice to do, and I will probably, you know how I am with my videos, completely random things, but I'm sure in the future you will see more things about this topic. But yes, that is that. And I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you for listening, and goodbye for now. Awoogie.